Good morning. Welcome to Unity Longmont Spiritual Center on the 12th of January, 2025. We are blessed to have Bobbie Wilson with us for the talk and to have Christina Hildebrandt with us and her harp for the music. We'll start with Christina.
Okay.
Heavenly Christina, thank you. Let us go into prayer together by taking a breath, being aware of ourselves and each other. Beloved presence, we slow down this morning, spend some time together, listening to beautiful music, beautiful messages. We open our hearts to receive the wisdom. We remember who we truly are, that in addition to being human, we are divine. We celebrate that with each other. And so it is. Amen. And we'll hear from Christina. Thank you, Christina. You take us to such mystical places. Thank you.
Did you hear my kitty too?
No, I did not,
Oh,
unfortunately.
okay. That is too bad.
Thank you. So let us open our hearts and minds to Bobbie as she shares some wisdom. Thank you, Bobbie.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to share what comes through because I'm always just waiting to hear what the topic is for our talks. And I was given this topic and I'm like, 20 minutes. We only have 20 minutes. But what I was given was these words: sympathy, empathy, compassion, and love. Okay. So recently, as I've talked to you before, this winter, I've been going through two spiritual classics. One is I Am That, which is Nisargadatta's um, transcribed answers to questions that people have asked him, and The Eye of the Eye, which is from David Hawkins. And so my talk is going to come generally from some of those teachings. So I'm going to quote something and then we're going to unpack it because this is quite dense. And this is from Nisargadatta. And he was asked questions by people who said, well, don't you have feelings like the rest of us? You're always up in the clouds. What about what's going on in the world? Yada, yada, yada. And they're always kind of not grasping what he's trying to tell them, which is, I am that. I am all. I am all that is. So he says, you are not in the body. The body is in you. Think about that. It's not the you that we think we are that he's talking about. He's talking about the you, that higher self, that you that is all. And so when I read that, I did a double take. It's like, whoa. Because so much of my spiritual path has been like, let's go inside, let's feel all the feelings, let's get rid of the gunk. And that's all good, nothing wrong with that. But it felt lonely. Felt like I was doing this all by myself. And when I read this, it's like, you are not in the body. The spirit is not just in the body. The body is in the spirit. And so doing this investigation in myself is actually a spiritual doing. It's a doing of spirit. It's not alone. It's not this little human trying to be perfected. So I'm going to quote Nisargadatta, and if you don't follow, no worries, because we'll unpack it later. He says, that which you are, your true self, you love it. And whatever you do, do for your own happiness. To find it, to know it, to cherish it is your basic urge. Since time immemorial, you loved yourself, but never wisely. Use your body and mind wisely in the service of the self that is all. Now understand what he's using here. The word self is not the self that we think we are. Be true to your own self. Love yourself absolutely. Do not pretend that you love others as yourself unless you have realized them as one with yourself. You cannot love them unless you do that. When you know beyond all doubting that that same life flows through all that is, and you are that life, you will love all naturally and spontaneously. There's no effort. When you know the depth and fullness of your love of yourself, you can know that every living being and the entire universe are included in your affection. But when you look at anything as separate from you, you cannot love it, for you are afraid of it. Alienation causes fear, and fear deepens alienation. It is a vicious circle. Only self-realization, big S self, can break it. Go for it resolutely. So there's the quote. I'm going to divert for a minute because, as you know, there have been fires in Southern California, very near to where we are. And although we are not affected, we don't even have the smell of smoke. I was looking at my emotions around it. And I was like, oh, okay, those poor people over there. You know, they're over there all alone, losing their homes, losing everything. And then I'm going, yeah, and I could be in that situation too. I could know what that feels like, but I don't. And then it's like, well, let's have compassion for these folks. But all the time I'm thinking these things, I'm sitting here going, I'm glad I'm not them. You know, if I'm being very honest, I'm glad that I'm safe. And then I started thinking about sympathy, which is, oh, those poor people. And empathy, which is, oh, I can relate to that feeling. And compassion, which can only be really experienced through spirit. It can't really be experienced as me as a little human, because what I want to do with compassion is to make everything all better. I want to make them feel better. And so I take responsibility, and it's a job. But real compassion, as it's taught, is just being with, being as, being. So I began to think about sympathy, empathy, compassion, and love. And I started looking at how I thought about those things. And I had negative vibes about sympathy because it's so often defined as pity. And I had guilty vibes about empathy because I so often am not empathetic. And I had sort of maybe shameful vibes about compassion because am I worthy to feel compassion? And so I began to look at how our level of consciousness at any given moment actually predicts how we're going to relate to each other when it comes to this. When we see suffering, and when we see suffering, if we are afraid of it, if we are scared, if we're pulled into ourself, then if we're not overly narcissistic, we'll feel sympathy. Oh, I'll send them a card. I'll donate some money. If we're narcissistic, then we go into self-love, which is not with love for others. It's just simply self-love. Self-love in its inclusive higher consciousness is loving of the self and others. So, am I making sense? Okay. So, thinking about all of that, I thought, you know, we go in and out of our levels of consciousness, and they're good indicators of our levels of fear. And so if I'm just afraid of being with the fires, with the people, seeing, then I will go into sympathy, and then I can merge into empathy, then maybe I can get to some form of compassion. So I looked at David Hawkins and his chapter on love, because I think he incorporates all of these. And well, before I go there, I just want to say one thing. I really got in touch with some of my beliefs around these three attributes: sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And I tend to judge others who can't or won't show sympathy, or empathy. And I also tend to believe that true compassion is not attainable to the unenlightened. So those are two of the beliefs I was holding, and both of them are false. Both of them are false. So, and that was a wonderful realization to me right now. It's like, okay, I'm judging those people because they're not showing empathy. Well, we all know people who can't show empathy, who are not able to show empathy. And it's so easy to judge because we're so superior. So, so anyway, I looked at Hawkins and his book. Actually, I took this from Power versus, no, from Power versus Force. Not this book, this is The Eye of the Eye, but Power versus Force is similarly decorated, slightly different colors. And that was his first book, Power versus Force, where he identifies all these levels of consciousness. And he talks about one of the higher levels of consciousness as being love. Love happens beyond reason. Reason is logic. That's slightly lower level than consciousness than love. Love doesn't depend on logic, doesn't need logic. It's not logical. So I'm going to quote some things, and perhaps this will help unpack the statement of Nisargadatta that we read earlier. He says, love is not intellectual and does not depend or proceed from the mind. Love emanates from the heart. It has the capacity to lift others and accomplish great feats because of its purity of motive. In other words, what's he mean by that? Purity of motive. It doesn't want anything. It doesn't need anything. And when we went into the meditation this morning, we did that meditation where I am not contained in the body. The body is contained in the self. When we identify with that self, we are eminently powerful. We can accomplish great feats because we are that love. We are that. We are that. This is not anything the mind can understand. It makes no sense, really. So the mind deals with reason and logic. Reason deals with particulars. Reason deals with how are we going to fight these fires? How are we going to be with these people? How are we going to help this out? Whereas love deals with wholes, not particulars. It deals with what is my function in this wholeness that I find myself in this world where things are happening and the spirit wants to flow out of through me. How is that working? Another thing that he says about love is love takes no position. It doesn't have any, it's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's not right, it's not wrong. Love takes no position and thus is global, rising above the separation of positionality. What that means is love doesn't care what you think or I think, or what you believe or I believe. Love just is. It's always there. It's in everything and everyone. It's global. And he says, as a result, it is then possible to be one with another, as there are no longer any barriers. There are no longer any beliefs or positions or identities to separate us. We're just one. We're just one. Love is therefore inclusive and progressively expands as we expand our consciousness into the self that we are, into the oneness that we are. So as we become lifted in our spirit, as we progress in our spirituality, we expand. That which we are, the essence of being, expands to encompass more and more. And the sense of self becomes greater and greater and beyond. He says, love focuses on the goodness of life in all its expressions, its expressions, and augments that which is positive. It dissolves negativity by reframing it rather than attacking it. So look at a narcissistic person. It's so easy to judge that. But what if it were you? What if it were me? What if I was unable to empathize? What if I was unable to see beyond this little me? What if I was unable, because I was so attached to the mind and the neediness and the fear of not getting, that I could not allow anything else in? Doesn't that recontextualize narcissism a bit? Can't we be a little bit more compassionate? I say that for myself. As such, love is benign, supportive, it nurtures life. Consequently, it is the level of true happiness. Happiness is also something that depends on our level of consciousness. We can be sporadically happy when we're in the mind, in the little body, trying to do things that make us feel better and all of that. We can be sporadically happy when a desire is satisfied or a need is met. But as we become more open to the love that we are, we become happier. We become more consistently happy no matter what. You know, it's easier to get into that state. He says, thus personal self-interest is no longer dominant as selfishness or neediness. The view of the self is that of benign adequacy. We are enough. We are enough. And alignment with love as its primary goal. I can be loving. I can align with what's loving. The energy field of love is innately gratifying in and of its own quality. In other words, when we are feeling that energy of love, that allness, that goodness, that faith in all that is, it's gratifying just because it is, just because love is there. It is discovered that love is available everywhere and that lovingness results in the return of love. As we express love, guess what? It comes back and it fills us as well as everyone else. Because, why? We're all connected. We're all one. Another aspect of love, as love progresses, as we allow ourselves to grow into that self that we are, and we become aware more and more of the love that we are, as it progresses, it seeks no return or gain, for it is self-rewarding by virtue of its completeness, since it has no needs. Think of the great avatars. Think of Jesus, think of Dalai Lama, think of Saint Teresa, think of all of those saints, all those great ones. You never hear them complain about there's not enough of this, or they want something else, or there should be that. They're just complete. That's the nature of love. It's complete. It doesn't have needs. Not that the body doesn't need things, not that we don't need to satisfy the day-to-day, but if we're existing in love, that consciousness has some kind of persistent awareness that I don't need to desire, I don't need to want, I don't need to be lacking because all of that is right here. All of that is available. That doesn't make any sense to the mind, by the way, so don't try and figure that out. He says the capacity for love grows so that the more one loves, the more one can love, and there is no endpoint or limitation. Let's chew on that for a minute. The more I learn to love, the more I can love what I think I don't like or what I think is not good, the more I can get to the point where love existing in that. Love is existing in the fires. Love is existing in the devastation. I don't know what it is or where it is because my mind can't find it, and if I'm in that energy of love, I know it can't destroy us as we are, the self. In addition, he says, it is discovered, he always used passive tense because he doesn't use the personal pronoun. He says, it is discovered that to be loving is also to be lovable. Chew on that for a minute. I'm loving, and in that, I discover love coming back to me. I'm lovable. There's no shame in it. Okay, now he goes into a little bit of what he called, how am I doing on time? Okay, let's see. Let's see if we want to go into, okay. He goes into a little bit about the ego dynamics for love, because even the ego can perceive or respond to the energy of love. And we all have ego. We're all egoic as we think of ourselves as a little self. So the capacity for love increases as the limitations of the narcissistic ego's perceptual positionalities are surrendered. Okay, what's that mean? As I shed the ego's belief systems and the ego's ideas and the ego's limitations, I have an increased capacity for the ego to accept that there is love. So even as we're operating somewhat egoically, we know about love because we can experience it sometimes. He says, love is a quality of divinity, and as such illuminates the essence and therefore the lovability of others. Think about that for a sec. If we are divinely given love, and it's a quality of divinity, and we believe the divine is in everyone and everything, then that illuminates the love in others, even though it may not look like they are showing it, even though we want to say it's not there. It is there. It is in others. It's in everything. Okay, he says as the ego, as we operate through ego, the limitations may be frustrating to those of us who aspire to be spiritually perfect, to see past the behaviors and love the other person, even though they're not lovable. Yeah, it's that surrendering and relinquishing of judgment that greatly increases the capacity of. So if I'm just aware that I'm judging somebody and I notice it and I can let it go a little bit, I'm more able to see the divine in them. I'm more able to see that there's love there. Love is self-fulfilling and thus does not seek gain or to compensate for lack because it does not need to get. It is therefore free to peacefully be with and appreciate. I think that's very close to compassion. the being with and appreciating. It's just that. I'm not afraid to be with your suffering. I'm not afraid to appreciate that you and I are both suffering. To love the world is more benign. To love that the world is more benign and it's a people. Wait a minute. To love, to the idea of love, to the concept of love, to the beingness of love, the world is more benign and its people appear more friendly and available. I've experienced that. You go in with the intention, go in the grocery store and say, I'm going to just be the love and see everyone as love. Guess what? Your experience of shopping for groceries becomes a spiritual revelation. There is an increased feeling of safety and identification with mankind in general and concern for the welfare and happiness of others. Now, there's like an empathetic, compassionate element to us, even as egoic beings, human beings, that as we allow that love, that divine love to flow through us, we are increasingly able to identify with and have concern for the well-being of others. Love as a mode of existence requires no others as objects for fulfillment or expression. In other words, love in and of itself is enough. We don't need to express it as I love you or you love me, because think about how it feels just to be in love. What is that loving feeling? What is that energy? What is that? It doesn't require, you can be that alone. You can be that alone. And this is, I think, where as an individual, as a human, we get a little technique to help us through as we progress in this progression towards love. He says, a key to making love unconditional is the willingness of forgiveness to undo past reservations, experiences, and viewing people as unlovable. So who do we forgive? Them? No, us. I was the one that made you unlovable. I was the one that thought that experience was terrible. I was the one that had reservations about talking to you because I didn't think you were safe. I was the one. I forgive myself. Forgiveness ensues from the willingness of humility to surrender the world and its events to God. I surrender the fires. I surrender the fires to God. I don't know what they're for. So, going back to Nisargadatta and his, by the way, if you get a chance, you can YouTube him. He is not a nice, sweet person. He's very aggressive and he'll point his finger at people and he'll say, get out. But he knows. He knows. He's realized. And so let's just rest as we end the talk in this. You are not in the body. The body is in you. You contain the ego. You contain the mind. You contain the self. And you are all that. And so it is.
Wonderful, Bobbie. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we will now turn to Christina for more wondrous things.
Bobbie, can you tell me the name of that person again? Although we can't hear you.
I muted you, Bobbie.
That's okay. I'm out now. Nisargadatta. It's Nisargadatta. Argadatta, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you. It's at this time that we go into what we call our donation of love and light. And I'm going to encourage us today, as we breathe and we allow ourselves to be in our body, to notice if there's any part of ourself that is calling for that love, to share the love, to be the love that we are, which may bring us to something that is asking for forgiveness. So let us spend a few moments in silence exploring what we may need. Let us remember we can do this at any time. We can take a moment, take a breath, and be aware of who we are and what the human part of us may need, which the divinity can provide. And so it is. And we will finish with Christina.
Bobbie, one of the things you said that really struck me positively was the idea of being with and appreciating whatever is happening, whether that's a person or an event. And appreciation can be something that's pleasant, that we kind of like, or it can be appreciating the gravity of a situation or what a person's going through or what we ourselves are going through. So that's what I'd like to address.